Hi there everyone, nice to see you here. Let me get started. I'm Winston Brown and I'm here to give you an insight into one of the lead characters from my book, NOMAD. Ralf plays the part of our chief pilot, and whilst his ability as a pilot should not be questioned, his leisure time pursuits were something else. I could jokingly say if Ralf was a prize bull, you'd have to build a strong stockade to keep him in, and also strong enough to keep his lady friends out. Lover boy extraordinaire. Anyway, here is a sample from the book. Ralf leaned back in the chair and decided to shout himself another juice. He felt pretty pleased with himself. Suzie would be leaving work in another half hour, and she could make it home in about 20 minutes after that. He'd better book somewhere for dinner, but where? The restaurant at the Aviate Club? The Devara? Maybe even the Coconut Hut, or just around the corner. Nah, he was sick of the Barocco ones. The Devara would be nice. They'd be looked after there. And he certainly felt like a good steak. Yes, he'd make a booking, then have a shower. Suzie could fit in with 6:30 dinner, and then they could come back to the flat and slowly drive each other wild. Suzie worked for the Australian Government office at Waigani, soon to become the High Commission. With a surname of Kwan and no relation to Nancy, she just naturally inherited the Suzie Wong title. It so happened she had the hair to go with it too. Long, brunette, and finer than you might expect. She was proud of her hair and wore it in its natural state, long, ending well below her beautifully proportioned hips. Her Eurasian genes had endowed her with a fuller bust, and her 165 centimetres were exquisitely in proportion. She just turned heads wherever she went. In fact, in the modern vernacular, Suzie and Ralf were an item in every sense of the word. Suzie arrived home to passionate embraces from Ralf as he explained his plans for the evening. An urgency to allow the embraces to develop was present in both of them. But there would be time for that later. Showered and changed, they headed off in the Capri during that short half hour of twilight, so delightful in the tropics. They crested 3 Mile Hill, rounded a corner, and sitting high atop the hill were greeted by a beautiful red sunset reflected off the towering cumulus clouds out to sea. Often they would pull into the lay-by there and park next to the Kokoda Monument to watch the sun set over Basilisk Passage. But on this day they drove on, wanting to clear the Koki Market area before dark, when the demons declared this section of road a no-go zone. Usually at ease during the day, the evil of the city came alive at night, and Koki was one area that was more than dangerous. They were met at the dining room entrance by the manager and shown to a table. Susie's white bodice embroidered cheongsam and her exquisite features did not go unnoticed by the tables of unsuited businessmen in the room. Ralf could feel their eyes and hear their whispers, and smiled to himself with pride. Even the wives in the room took turn at taking a glance. Yes, they made a handsome couple. Ralf offered the menu. Suzie, darling, what do you feel like this evening? I thought I might have that nice steak and a bottle of red. Are you up to a glass to help me out? Yes, that sounds nice. I'll have that ribeye. Medium rare with a side salad, thanks. But there's no way I'm touching your wine. 2 nights you've been away now, and I've a lot to do before I fall asleep. Suzie smiled with that wicked twinkle in her eyes. Ralf, feeling the stir between his legs at the suggestion, smiled back knowingly. At the same time, he felt her foot gently rubbing the inside of his leg. I've got the next 4 days off, out of hours. That's fantastic, Precious, smiled Suzie. Yes, but I've got to go off to Wewak again. Ralf reached across, taking her hand as he explained his commitment, Harry's situation, and the plans they had. The meals and wine were served and thoroughly enjoyed, while Ralf took his time to fill in the details of their plans. She wasn't looking forward to sleeping alone for the next 3 nights, but she could appreciate his entrepreneurial spirit. Until this moment, she hadn't realised how much of it he had. Perhaps he wasn't the good-for-nothing toy boy that her father said he was. The chocolate gâteau was Ralph's choice, and Suzie had the banana fritters and ice cream. Goroka coffee followed, freshly roasted and ground. And still Suzie was listening to how the 2 pilots would develop the best aviation company in Papua New Guinea. It wasn't until Ralf held the car door open for her and she felt his finger travel up her spine that her thoughts returned to the exciting nocturnal hours that beckoned them home. As Ralf hummed along at just over the speed limit, their hands met over the central map compartment, and their fingers entwined with a soft passion. Darling, would you allow me a little experiment when we get home? Of course, Precious, anything, agreed Ralf. Linda at work has this book on Eastern culture. Have you heard of Tantra? No. What is it? You must have heard of the Kama Sutra. Well, Tantra incorporates it. The Himalayan Indians and Tibetans used it as a philosophy for life. The word karma means sensual pleasure, and sutra, a thread or line that holds things together. Together they mean weaving all spiritual, physical, and sexual aspects of life into a harmonious whole. And what is our little experiment going to be? We will quietly undress each other until we are completely naked, maintaining calm and serenity while we sit cross-legged facing each other. Then we'll communicate with just our eyes for 5 minutes. All the lovely emotions that we feel and receive from each other will harmonize our energies, openness, and oneness. That's what it's all about. Are we allowed to touch each other? Asked Ralf. Of course, if you want to. There are no hard and fast rules. Just remember how beautiful and full of expression our eyes can be. I know I can admire, long for, need and devour you just by looking. And you in turn take delight in seeing me do this, and vice versa. They turned into Corapacia Drive and were not far from home. Suzie was now feeling confident. She had noticed the occasional slight pressure on her hand in his and as she had been explaining the detail of their Tantra experiment. No sooner was she through the door than she turned to him and extracted his tie silk shirt from his waistband. "I thought the idea was to do this slowly," grinned Ralph. "This is slow. If I gave my emotions their rein, your elegant shirt would be in tatters by now," she grinned back. Ralph reached over her arms to work on the concealed zip under the buttons on her left shoulder. Her fingers were now undoing his shirt buttons, one by one, from bottom to top. At the halfway stage, she could not resist placing her palm first on his belly and then sliding her fingers upwards to his chest, combing through his body hair, finishing by playfully tracing her fingernails over his left breast. In so doing, she did not hamper his delicate efforts to release her cheongsam. Success. The dress slipped slowly to the floor as Suzie wriggled her right shoulder, then her hips to enable it to slide off, exposing her breasts with their erect chocolate button nipples. Having removed his shirt, Suzie now worked on unbuckling his belt. At the same time, she arched her neck back and to the right as his tongue traced her neck, her jawline, and lips. That's as much as I can afford to give you at the moment. Of course, you can imagine how the night develops. Ralph and Suzie are certainly an item. Give me another couple of days and I'll come up with another excerpt to tantalize you again. Bye.